Welcome to this session from Massasoit to Ousamequin. We're excited to kind of share this project with you, and I'm just going to introduce our panel today. I'm Makai Gleaves. I work at the Springville Museum of Art in the Education Department. I'm also the Diversity, Equity, Accessibility, and Inclusion Coordinator. And we have Larsen, who is our Associate Director at the museum. She is over exhibitions and operations and was the project manager. And we have next to her, Judy Mansfield, who is also at the Springville Museum. She works with us in events and at the front desk. She is from the Northern Shoshone tribe. She was a consultant for this project. And Brenda Beyal, she is with the BYU Arts Partnership and the Native American Curriculum Initiative. And she was also a consultant for this project. So today we're gonna go through a little slideshow. Emily's gonna lead that and kind of go over the project. Then I'll ask the panelists, I'm gonna act more as a moderator today. I'll ask the panelists a few questions and then we'll open it up to questions from anyone in the audience.
All right, thanks for joining us. We're excited to talk about this project, and it's exciting to have people from both museums and history in the room. So we have had the plaster cast of Cyrus Dallon's Massasoit sculpture at the museum since the 80s, I think since the early 1980s on loan, and it's been on permanent display at the museum. And I've been involved in the museum a long time. I started as an intern and volunteer in 2008, and since I was there, we had the same interpretation and signage around the sculpture. And even though our interpretive strategies and philosophies had changed, we hadn't gotten around to updating the interpretation and things around the sculpture. So we wanted, it was a goal of our staff to kind of update the signage and interpretive materials that our visitors used to engage with this sculpture that was on permanent display. And if you don't know, I'll go back to, Massasoit is a term that means leader, and oftentimes this figure, his name is, you think his name is Massasoit, but he was the a chief or leader of the Wampanoag tribe in 17th century New England when the Pilgrims came to Plymouth Rock. So one of our big questions as we were working with this object is, what is our interpretive responsibility with this object? How do we honor one of the museum's founding artists, because Cyrus Dallon is from Springville and is a huge part of our history at the Springville Museum of Art, but also nuance the complexity of a white artist in the 1920s creating a sculpture of a New England Native American chief that's now on display in Utah. So that's a lot of complexity of why it's in Springville and who it is and who it's depicting. And so how do we incorporate the voices and perspectives of the Wampanoag and our local Utah Indigenous communities? Those were a lot of the questions we were grappling with as we moved on this project. So before, the interpretation really emphasized, and you guys probably know this if you've been around Utah, all the different places you can find Massasoit. He's up at the state capitol, he's in Kansas City at BYU campus, and then the place where it was commissioned for at Plymouth Rock. And then the other side of the interpretation really did emphasize that kind of mythology around Massasoit about him as the chief that bridged the gap between the Pilgrims and the Native Americans in New England and the Thanksgiving story. And that's what people really usually know about Massasoit, and it becomes really mythologized and romanticized the way it's spread. And if you want a really great lesson about the real Thanksgiving, Brenda can tell you where to find some resources on that. But some of the illustrations that were on display too kind of just emphasize that old story that we wanted to show a little bit more complexity and nuance and help our visitors understand that. And this was one of the text panels that was up too. So kind of really a lot of text, and again, kind of emphasizing some of those things without as much nuance as we wanted. So our process for redoing the interpretation and signage around this sculpture was, first we kind of started having medians and goals. What did we want to do, and what was our staff's goals with this? And that was our first step. Then we started doing research, and we actually had an intern from BYU for a year. Her name's Megan Anderson Evans, and she gets a lot of credit for this in this process. She just started doing a lot of research We were really lucky that two really amazing historians, Lisa Blay and Jean M. O'Brien, had been doing a lot of research on this sculpture and its reception in all its different places. So we leaned really heavily on their findings. They found a lot that when they were in all the different places, including the Springville Museum of Art where this sculpture was, people who were engaging with it thought it was a Native American chief from that area. So in Kansas City, they thought it was Plains Indian. In Utah, they thought it was a Ute chief, and they weren't getting the context and connection to New England and the Wampanoag. And so that was a really helpful research. Then we did some first drafts of what we thought our the interpretation could look like. And then I think the most important part of this process for us was doing a pretty big focus group. We invited, I have the list in my bag, I should have counted before I came up here, but I think it was 8 different Indigenous educators from our local area in the state to come and do a focus group at the museum, and we paid them each an honorarium to participate and give feedback on the drafts that we had done, and how, especially because of this misconception of the sculpture that it was a Utah Native American, we really wanted to get our local tribes and Indigenous educators' perspectives on how they would want to interpret it to help nuance that. And so we did that focus group, and that came back with so many different ideas and directions and feedback that then we kind of had to go back in the process, back to research, and then really helped us solidify what were the main ideas that we wanted to focus on in this interpretation and what was important to for our visitors to understand as they came through. And you'll see we really came up with, there's a lot of context we included, and we figured out a way to provide more information for those who wanted it. But the real things that our focus group and our staff and through this process we wanted to distill is that Massasoit means leader, and that the historical figure's name is Ousamequin, and that why is this sculpture in Springville, and really connecting it so our visitors understood it's not a Utah native. And then we did more drafts and edits, and we finally implemented it. And I think, well, I'll get to takeaways later. But anyway, yes. So this is what it looks like now. And sorry, these are bad photos I took on myself, and I should have had Marielle take photos for me, or Leslie. But we have an iPad that has a lot of more context for people to get into more deeply as they want. On this side, we have just a big poster that says, "Hello, my name is Ousamequin. I was a Native American chief of the Wampanoag in New England in the 17th century. Massasoit means great Sachem or leader." And so that was just like in big, bold things. If that's all the visitors got, we were happy with that. One of the things that came up from the focus group was, since Massasoit means leader, doing some focus on our local Indigenous leaders. So we had a lot of great ideas of how to do that. And the one that we were able to do and implement was this slideshow that features some of the current tribal chiefs of our local Indigenous nations here in Utah. And then on the other side, it goes into why is this sculpture in Springville, Utah, and talks about how this sculpture is in Springville because the artist is from Springville, one of our founding artists, and not because the sculpture is of a Utah Native American. And then on this iPad, we get into a lot more context and nuance, and a lot of the content on here also came from the focus group of things to emphasize about the complexity of this history, and people can look at it in the gallery on the iPad and click through, and also we have a QR code. And Marielle's gonna open so you can see a little bit of some of the things that are available on iPad. And this virtual tour of the object was created by the VR wizards. And so if you're interested in that, Eileen's right here and she can talk to you about some of that. And this is all my fault because we have been slow sometimes in getting content, but there will be a Spanish version. It's actually, we just have to finally approve it. So it will be available in English and Spanish, but you can click on different parts of the object and get a little bit more close-ups, some contextual images. That's one thing that through the focus group and through our research, we really wanted to emphasize like the actual artifacts and people from the Wampanoag tribe in comparison to how Dowling depicts it. That's one thing we wanted to emphasize to our visitors too, is this is Dowling's romanticized kind of version of a Wampanoag chief from the 17th century, not how they would depict themselves, and not really necessarily even accurate. Well, definitely not accurate. So there's a lot more that if someone's really wanting to do the deeper dive, there's a lot more content on the app. And I think that's probably a good overview of the project. Oh, I remember I have one more slide, so we can exit out of this. And we can send you this link or help if you're interested, but our takeaways from this whole process are, it's really important to be specific, especially when you're doing Native American and Indigenous history, because that is one of the biggest things that people mash all these in Utah tribes, but even as when you're seeing like a 17th century New England tribe with a 21st century Utah tribe or 20th century Utah tribe, and really helping our visitors as museum professionals understand the complexity and that each tribe has its own culture and a specific context matters, that it's important when we have these objects and are working with them, with the public, to give that context. This project was so much better because dozens and dozens of people worked on it, and we allowed for that feedback and discussion. And so that's been really helpful, and same kind of emphasizing collaboration and compromise. And then these last two are, I think, two of my biggest takeaways from this project is progress is better than perfection. We took a long time of actually getting this up in the galleries, and actually my coworkers scheduled an event that kind of forced us to open this exhibition. And it was good. It was good because I was definitely scared. I know other people, maybe no one was as scared as me, but to get out there, we kept wanting to make it better and better. And it's not perfect, but it's way better than it was. And that's something. And then you can't do everything in one project. We got so many ideas from the focus group and from people that were really good ideas and could have made this project better in some ways, but we had to just, for capacity, resources, had to choose what was the most important and do that. And that, I think that made it better to not try and do everything else. And I'll turn time back over to Leslie, and we'll go back to look at.
Do you guys have enough? Should I have this here? And we'll switch this way. I guess we can start. Thank you, Emily, for doing that project overview. It's been a process in the making, and I loved how you kind of touched on, what we've done so far, and what are some things that, and you just mentioned that we weren't initially able to do that maybe we could move forward with in the future.
Well, I think there were so many ideas. I think one thing that we want to do more of that we just haven't been able to do at a really sophisticated level yet is get more input from the Wampanoag tribe and their cultural leaders. We really focus and emphasize our local stakeholders and relationships, because that's who's interpreted it. But I think that's a huge thing that we want to do and move forward with.
Yeah. And maybe let's start with Brenda. How did you get involved with this process? And we mentioned the focus group. How did you get involved, and what have you been able to give to this?
Well, before Emily actually emailed me and asked me to be a part of the focus group. And so that's how I became involved with the actual project. But even before then, I would bring my students, when I was still teaching school, to this sculpture, and we would talk about it. And I always had an interest in it and how it was portrayed and what its actual meaning was.
And Judy, what about you? How did you become involved with this? And
I was honored to be part of the Springville Museum of Art front desk event host, but also looking at the figure. This figure has followed me throughout my life. Those of you at BYU, he's like my old friend. I've seen him, and back then in the old days, I came from a reservation. I had 2 pairs of shoes, white tennis shoes and sandals, and I come to my roommates, they have tons of shoes. And I have a paper bag with my clothes in it. Everyone has tons of clothes. So this figure may not be significant to a lot of people, but it has been to me, because it was some representation when I passed by at BYU. And all of a sudden, that was years ago, and I come to work and I see, oh, he's here again. He's my old friend. But this time I know his name, which has been hidden from me all these years. I thought his name was Massasoit. I didn't know until we did this project. So I was just in the dark as everybody else was. But becoming involved in this project was a natural occurrence because I happened to be there. I feel like it was something that was destined for me to be there for, because it does mean something to me. And I do feel something. As a Native American, I do feel a presence there. Some people may think, well, it's not of a tribe here. But when you get together, that's what we do. We celebrate each other, no matter what tribe we are. So I enjoyed the fact that, and it was a pleasure, a real pleasure to sit there and associate with people. And I have to give credit to the Springville Museum of Art. I went to another workshop yesterday, and there was a gentleman speaking of Springville, a museum, saying it was a pleasure to go to a place that had a spiritual and religious show that had deity of vast color of people. And I have to agree that I'm lucky that there's a mindset there that's willing to do such a project.
And I'll say too, both Brenda and Judy participated in that initial focus group. And then because Brenda serves on our teacher advisory board and Judy works at the museum, we kept bugging them for more and more feedback throughout the process. And Judy copy edited a lot of versions of the text and drafts and gave feedback, which was really, really helpful.
Judy, just following up with that, what is one of the greatest benefits of this reinterpretation of the sculpture? And you mentioned a little bit about it for you personally, but also for any viewer that comes to the museum. How is that beneficial?
I think right now, as I look at the audience right now, we're talking about people who are in the museum to spread information. Our mission was contemplation and beauty that we're trying to spread. But how can you spread any thoughtful contemplation unless there's accuracy? At least it may not be complete accuracy, but the focus is that's the trend that I will try to follow. And I think it's the trendsetters. You may be, I'm a receptionist event host, but I had some influence on that. And you have a lot more influence in your positions to do such a thing. From day to night, you can change an institution by this. And I think the benefits I see for the museum is your community who are interested, who will learn, because there's a lot out there, as we know in media, so much media out there of true and false information. And if museums give that educational benefit, how much more richer is your museum with that extra, those little tiny cards that are right beside them. I don't think you know how dynamic that is, especially to children. That will be their impression, their picture of whatever you display for a long time afterwards. And so I think it's a critical piece that museums, no matter who you are, which, you know, like I said, I'm not the head staff, I'm not anything like that, but to have some kind of influence to say, or listening ears to say, hey, there's something that can be changed. What little, and not a lot of the times it is that, what little can I do to help?
Brenda, did you have, in addition to that, a benefit that you felt came from this project?
I think that there are many benefits. I don't know if any of you, and I can't remember her name. It's she's done a wonderful podcast on the danger of a single story. And I think there is danger in a single story, especially when it is a museum or someone in a position of power that only shares a single story. And so with the Springville Museum of Art, there, I feel like the efforts to tell a different story and a different perspective really enriches everyone's understanding. And in our organization, we always go back to, does it enrich someone's understanding? And I think about children that will be coming to maybe view this, like I used to take my students. There is so much more to the story now. And I think that it actually is what's in a name. I think that's the title. And I love that because for so long, Ousamequin has been known as Massasoit. And we've all known him as Massasoit. And though it's a worthy name, he was a leader. But who wants to just be known as just a leader or a, like, oh, he's our worker, or, oh, yep, this is a child. We all want to be known by our names. And I just feel like this is just a little bit of giving soul back to Massasoit. And so I think those are lasting effects, whether we can tangibly feel them or hear them. I coming from my culture, I really believe that you do give spirit and soul back when you actually call someone by their name. And I think that that's an important part of this story.
For Judy and Brenda, how does this exhibition honor you and your tribal affiliations?
Definitely, yes. I think the process was a wonderful process because we call it a meeting. Native time, we call it gathering. So when I'm speaking to you, I'm talking to the very last person I can see. That's a gathering. That's a meeting. That's who my audience is really, because I don't have to worry about the front. I talk to the back. And I think that's what's lost in Zoom meeting, is that gathering, because it's whatever energy you bring in here and what's your purpose for here. If it's to be here physically, that means a lot. Back home, we can't vote unless you're physically there. They don't accept votes. And so I think it helped me. I'm Northwest Shoshone, also Yakima tribe from Washington. Name giving is a very important thing back home. We give Indian names. And so when we went into this process internally, I thought it was a name giving, saying we're giving him his name, even though we're giving it back. To me, it's a new name because I've never heard it before. So something that's not shown in these pictures, we have an exhibit right beside him, a native exhibit, which is a fully beaded buckskin dress, beaded necklaces, some representations of the Navajo people that are there too, with their crafts, wonderful paintings, exhibits that are right beside there, right on the other side of the left wall. And that's also in celebration. To me, that is a native way too, in giving back. We're celebrating that piece with us, a part of us. He gives us his name, we give something to him. So to me, it matched exactly what I thought it should be. And on November 2nd, we're going to honor those artists who brought them in, which is also their presence, another thing, a gathering. And so I think that's important. I think conferences are important because they do gather, they teach you that. Sometimes we miss that element of gathering. We think of the agenda, what I have to learn, but the learning is your association of one another, just like we do at our tribe. I can't affect anybody. We can't move a mountain. And I think we moved a big piece with this. And I enjoyed the process, but the exhibit itself is a real good celebration. If you could come down to our museum and see that, it'd be wonderful. It's there till January 11th. No, December 24th. Yeah. So if you could come, we invite you to come see it too and join in our celebration.
So I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about the word honoring. And I don't know if it initially honors my tribe, but I think it honors Native people and their voice. And in this case, Ousamequin, he has been known as Massasoit and is, I think, known, and history people, please let me know if I'm wrong, but I think he was the first leader of Native nations to sign a treaty. He signed it with the colonists and with the settlers that came. And I feel as though it is a giving back. I feel like it's a validation of Native people and Native people's ways. And I think looking deeper into his story helps to clear the the smudges in history that we just seem to just kind of glance over. I feel like it brings into focus a little bit more what happened in Plymouth Rock in 1621. I feel like it helps us to uncover other things. And it's interesting that with him, he helped, but then I wonder if I could talk to him, what he would say if he would have done things differently. If what he would say to us about, and I know this is my soapbox, what he would say to us about what we call the first Thanksgiving. That it wasn't a first Thanksgiving. It was maybe just keeping alliances alive, and like keeping, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer, kind of a harvest feast, rather than a time when Native people were brought together. And so I think it honors Native voices. I think that that's what it does. And so in that way, it honors Native people, all Native people.
Do you want to introduce contemporary voices and just how that connects with this project?
Yes, and I should have added a slide. I can send anyone the website or more information. But one of the things that did come up with in the focus group that we thought we might not be able to do, but we kind of pulled it together and did it with opening the Massasoit reinterpretation, is we did want to do a show of contemporary Native Utah artists and the work that they're doing today, because I think that's another stereotype misconception when people think about Native American history and culture, is that it's something in the past, and especially like Massasoit and his son King Philip are almost the epitome of that, like that this tribe died out and then the Pilgrims came in, and so we wanted to make sure that our visitors knew that there is a vibrant Native American culture in Utah from many different tribes and creating many different types of cultural objects, and we wanted their perspective to be emphasized as well, not just Silas Dallon's depiction. And so again, that's another project that's like progress, not perfection. I wish we could have done a much bigger, grander show, but it's a good start. And I think it's, maybe Judy, can I embarrass you a little bit? Will you stand up, please? Judy is one of the artists in the show because she does this amazing beadwork, and this is also a piece that she did. So there's Judy's beadwork, paintings, drawings, all sorts of different artistic objects. And it is a really nice, yes, because I'm just rambling.
I was just going to say that when we were in the focus group, that was an important part, or a point that we wanted to be made in this new exhibit, that we wanted Native Americans to be brought into the present, because so often we are in the past. And working with Native, the 8 sovereign nations here in Utah, and with our organization, we ask them, what would you like children of Utah to know about your culture or your people or your nation, your history? And the answer that has come from every single one of the 8 sovereign nations is, we are still here. We are survivors. We are resilient. Yes, we may have some damage, we may have some trauma, but we are still here. And so I love that SMOA has Massasoit there, and then right next to him is Contemporary Voices, and it's called Contemporary Voices, which I absolutely love. There's a quote that I don't know if yes, I guess it is a quote that I always try to live by as we're writing lesson plans or creating resources for teachers, is that when you are telling or teaching about the trauma of Native people, balance it with their brilliance and their creativity. And so whenever we're doing, when we talked about this and during our process, we said, where is the, there is trauma and there is tragedy right there with Ousamequin. But we need to balance that with the creativity and the giftedness of Native people. And that's why I love that it's paired with contemporary voices.
Maybe this is a question for Emily. So this sculpture right here is one of a few around the state and around the country that we talked about. We have the opportunity to house it indoors and have the space around it to give it some of this context. How do you think it's viewed differently, in an outdoor setting, and how can different sites include some of this reinterpretation so that as people visit this sculpture in its various locations, they have this information about who he actually was?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and obviously been a big debate in historical communities and in kind of our pop culture zeitgeist of talking about what are the role of monuments, where do they belong, should we tear them down, how do you contextualize them? And like you said, at a museum, we're much more lucky. We have all this wall space. You can put up an iPad. We can really add a lot of context. And I'm really interested to hear what Brenda and Judy say to this too. But I think I would recommend that book, Monumental Mobility, if working with any monuments, not just Dowlin's Massasoit, that because they really get into the memory work and reception of how monuments are perceived and how visitors engage with them, or I guess out in the open. I don't know if you'd call them a visitor. I'm so museum centric, but I think what I've learned is maybe if I was in charge of a monument, like on the state capitol or the one at BYU, I would probably try to distill what are the most important ideas, kind of like we did with our 2 big vinyl stickers. And I would maybe just say, okay, if the people engaging with this get 2 ideas, that his name's Ousamequin and he's from New England in the 17th century, and it's here on BYU campus because the artist is from Utah, I would try to create some kind of plaque or something that really distilled what are the most important contextual points. But I think that specificity and context really helps people better engage. I don't know, Judy, Brenda?
Well, just looking at him, he's 9.5 feet tall. Who's not going to forget him? He's pretty big. So I think that's a good part. You can tell he takes all the space that he has there, and the lighting in the back. You can see the mountains in back if you can see clear through the window. So it's a good place for him to be. But as museum people, you're here to find out, what can I do? What is this whole workshop is? I think a good part of it is that it just didn't stop there. When you have tours now, there's a script for people to read that honors the Native people and the Native land which the museum's on. Now, to me, that kind of means more to me than maybe this beginning part, because it actually shows it's going to last, and maybe something else will come from it in this piece. And as far as the Native community, a lot of people might be afraid to say, where do I start? Because I don't want to step on any toes. Well, me and Brenda, we're here. At least maybe the last resources you have, but at least we're here. We could get our names. We could do something. But Native community is pretty close. I've known Brenda for about 40 years, I think now. Isn't that? I hate to say that, but there's stories there. There's a lot of stories there that we have, but not only of the past, but the contemporary. I think that's what's kind of confusing to museum and other people. You can talk about the past because they're not here, but then there's us and our parents. It's like, how do we honor them? And those are present stories that, it's up to us, to be honest, to save and honor. Right now, I'm working with the Northwest Shoshone, their genealogy. I'm helping them put that together and linking more people together. The Northwest Shoshone people have a history that's tied to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They broke off as a branch. Now, this is my father and my grandfather who are speaking, that it was because of these dreams, visions, all these things that they received, that we are members. And it is part, I feel, of my culture that is tied to that. So when I see this monument right there, he represents more than just, his name. He represents a people that are still, as Brenda said, living and discovering who they really are. And for me, the more uncovering, the better. As museum people, it might be a one shot, a clap, a pat in the back, and let's move to the next people. But for Springville, it hasn't been that way, which I'm very proud of. With that script being in for tours, it's like, okay, it's continuing, there's pieces. And it's just not for Native American people, it's for all people. We have a great Russian exhibit above. You know, in these times, you know, museum wasn't budging or keeping that up. And a lot of people have appreciated that. And there's a lot of other, you know, so that presence is there. And I don't know if your museums have that presence as well. You probably do, unless you wouldn't still be here. So yeah, your community is important. And I think as far as this is concerned, your being here shows your willingness to be able to say, maybe there's can be some changes and not be afraid of the community. And I'm not going to say we're perfect. They're going to have some problems here and there. But, you know, the trial, at least, you know, there's some of us that are willing to say, okay, let's start with something.
Well, I would say that you're all smarter than I am. And I feel like one of the first steps that we all need to take when we work in organizations or museums or committees is take a look at ourselves. Really take a strong, clear look with lenses that allow for us to see maybe our implicit bias and see if our biases are contributing to maybe stereotypes or homogenization of culture. And so taking it from, you know, a museum and going to an open space, I think Emily's right, specificity is extremely important, but also making sure that whatever is put up, whatever you feel like is important, is not stereotypical, nor does it homogenize. And the only way to do that is by taking the time necessary to confront our own biases and see them clearly and put them out in front of us so that we don't allow them to creep into our projects and our work.
We'll just get to the last couple of questions. So this one for Emily, what have you learned personally and professionally during this project and also from a museum perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I might just be a broken record now, but I think my biggest takeaway has been to, like, progress is better than perfection, or don't let perfection be the enemy of the good, especially with work like this that is when we are trying to challenge biases and work with objects that have complicated context. Improvement is good. Like, I know there's a million things we could do to improve what's up right now, but if we had worked on it forever to try and make it as perfect as possible, it would have never gotten up, and so it would have been worse. And so I think that's a big takeaway. And I think all my work in museums and this project just emphasized it as well, like the power of collaboration and multiple voices, multiple stories, like Brenda said, that having different people with different perspectives come together and using that to make a better final product has been really useful for our museum. And yeah, what I would like to know what you learned from this project too, Leslie.
Well, this project, it's been a learning experience for all of us, and I've been really grateful to be a part of it. I think our institution has been on this journey of inclusion and diversity and accessibility for a few years now, which I'm really grateful for, coming in as a person of color to kind of, you know, be a voice and push it in that direction a little bit. But I love this idea of nothing about us without us. Like, we are not going to do things and move forward without the people that we're trying to do this about and for. Like, they need to be the voice. they need to be the ones that come in and give us input and we'll work together. And that's kind of what's been touching to me and what I've loved about this project. Thanks for including me in that and making me emotional. But
Can I add one more
yes,
thing?
yeah.
I think too, like sometimes I maybe a couple years ago I thought, okay, we're going to do this focus group and ask for this feedback once, and that will be this project. But like everything in life, kind of collaboration begets more collaboration, opportunity begets more opportunity. And now we've collaborated a lot with Brenda and Gina Irwin at the state, who are doing this Native American teaching roster, and Brenda's over the Native American curriculum initiative at BYU, and we've been able to partner even more in different meaningful ways and more programmatic ways, and I think that's been kind of an unexpected benefit. I think for both of us, it's definitely been a benefit for the museum to deepen those relationships both with artists and with educators and scholars. So
Yeah, and I think Judy mentioned it, so we incorporate a land acknowledgement in every tour that we give. And we don't want it to just be empty words and performative. I think this brings us to new relationships and really, you know, this reciprocity of we honor you, and you are still here. We are very much a part of what we do, and moving forward together, we want to, you know, give back in that particular way and work together. And this is, yeah, the reciprocity of it is we're honoring them. They're still here. We love their input. We want to help in any way we can, providing the space for different events and working with them on projects like this in the future to come. So one last question before we open it up to Q&A from the audience. What would you advise Native peoples when participating in a project like this?
I would say be honest and not be afraid to give your honest opinion or your honest perspective. And I'm just, you know, Native people are always telling stories. So I'm just going to tell a really quick story. We had an artist in resident come to a Title VI, which is a Native American program. And he was non-Native, and he handed paper out, and we asked him to come specifically because of his art abilities. And he had a group of Native kids in the room, and he handed out paper and he said, okay, now draw something Native American. And so the kids sat there and they just didn't know what to draw, but then they started drawing. And as I was looking around, there's my nephew. He's Navajo Diné, and he's drawing a teepee. And I'm like, Justin, have you ever been in a teepee? No. Why are you drawing a teepee? Because he wants something Native American. And I said, well, you're Native American. Well, why don't you draw something? He said, well, I'm drawing what I think he wants me to draw. And so that can go a long way. And so finally what we ended up doing is, and there were other kids drawing, you know, like drawing a buffalo, a bison. And we're like, have you ever had bison? You know, do you know what bison? And they're like, well, he wanted to draw something Native American. So many times, and we're finding our voice now, but there are times that I think Native Americans will give you exactly what they think you want. You know, like, okay, let's smoke the peace pipe here, and okay, let me give you what you want. It's not what I want, not what I feel. It's what I think you want from me. And so I would advise Native Americans to be honest, be willing to share their voice. And something I always think about when I think of a museum, and you know, I'm a teacher of kids, and so you always have to come up with little things. And when I think about a museum, I think of me, see me, and me, see you, and me. Museum. Okay, a museum is me, see you, and me. And if I talk to Native children, we look for how we can see ourselves in there and how we see other people. It's a reflection, and it's also looking into. And so I guess I would say that to Native people, make sure the museum is me, see, you, and me.
For my people, honestly, my advice, if this is a crowd of Native Americans, I just say enjoy the process. Enjoy that there's a piece coming. Relax. There's a time to be critical. There's a time for everything, but just think what we're doing right here. It's for a museum. You got to think of the purpose that's there. Engaged people know who you're talking to. You're not talking to legislators. You're not talking to other people. We're talking to museum people who portray still beauty, contemplation, interest, ideas, something that'll springboard into something better. So I think the focus that we're trying to get some goals and objectives that are realistic, but to sit back, relax, enjoy, and be able to listen to each other. And an additional comment too, I think that's again related to museum people. You're actually seeing a panel here, the Springville Museum of Art, who actually lived the mission. Maybe, I don't know if your museums do that, but reflect upon it and actually engage. I think that's a good lesson here too, is to say, okay, how do we incorporate the mission? This is definitely part of the mission.
Thank you so much. And we're going to turn the time over to you. I will walk around with the microphone. Have a question, just raise your hand. Here first.
Let me start with a comment. A variety of thoughts as I've listened to this wonderful panel today. I see, I go to the Springville Museum every spring. I love the show. I see what you're doing with your project, looking at it from the standpoint of the artist. He created something for somebody. It was commissioned. And so you give him, you take the title leader and give him the name that he was supposed to have. When I was a young boy, I used to go by the Capitol all the time and see that beautiful statue. And I always thought it was a Ute Indian. I always thought, maybe it's Wakara or Sandpitch or Petite Need or somebody like that, a Ute Indian. And I think art is in the eye of the beholder, right? And people in the Midwest, Kansas City, they think it looks like they're Sioux Indian people. And I just thought, I can see why you did what you did for the museum, but why couldn't we take that statue and make him Sagwich Timbimbu or Washaki? Art is art. I don't think that the artist, I forgot his name. I saw beads, a breech clout. I saw leather moccasins. He has a feather in his hair. It's a representation. So I just think, why couldn't he become a great leader chief here in Utah? That's just a thought that went through my mind.
And I think the research that they did in Monumental Mobility shows that your interpretation of the sculpture is very common, that most people interpret it that way. And I think though Dowling had good intentions, it's also kind of a fault of his for seeing this is a stereotypical representation of a Native American leader, right? That can be interpreted to represent different tribes and is not specific to the Wampanoag or to Massasoit in the 17th century. And that's, in my opinion, kind of part of the problem of the sculpture. And maybe it's not a problem, but why we wanted to get specific and add more context so people could start to see there are so many different tribes and so many different cultures at different times and places, and that it's not one monolith of Native American culture. I don't know, Judy or Brenda, if you want to.
Okay. Does that microphone work on the table?
We're really smart.
Yeah, we'll do this. That's wonderful, and I think your answer is coming. This is a step forward. It's step by step, just like we can't do the project all at once. this is a big step. So I know it will be in the future. It's coming.
Your rededication somewhere.
You know, you can't get any bored than I am in that. But I also have a math background and I know the sequential steps. But this actually is a step actually in that direction. So, you know, it's not a dream anymore. It will come.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make a quick comment more than anything else. First of all, yeah, he looks a lot more like a Ute than does that weird statue down in Provo City Center that's supposed to be a Ute. So I understand where you're coming from, but it's a symbol. To me, the statue has always been a symbol, and I know it was for my husband, who was part Native American. When he was a kid, they had one of these statues in Denver as well. And he was walking up the steps of the Capitol and he saluted it and said, "Hi, Grandpa." And his mom slapped him across the head and said, "Shut up." Because at the time, you don't admit you're Indian. You don't admit you're Native. You can admit you're Hispanic, but you don't admit you're a Native. But for him, Massasoit was a symbol of his Native American heritage, a symbol.
So just a thought. It is a symbol, and it could be Ute, but it could never be Navajo. And it could never be Hopi. And it could never be, and it isn't Wampanoag. And so I would have to ask a symbol of maybe a leader, but I think maybe. And so I tend to side with specificity, and because it is very stereotypical. I mean, my husband wishes he looked like that, but he really doesn't. And so I just love, well, let's maybe even talk about the word chief. There isn't a sovereign nation here in Utah that ever called their leaders chiefs. And so I think just more learning and more understanding, creating greater context, makes us even more appreciative of this art. I think it opens up conversations and it helps us to maybe dive deep a little bit. Maybe it gives us a little bit of, and that's okay. And I do think it does look more like a Ute. But Cyrus said it was Massasoit, and I beg to differ a little bit, and that's okay. So that's just my thought.
You said to be honest, right?
I love it. I love this conversation. I think these conversations have to be had, because then that's the only way we'll change minds or we'll change our perspectives. This is wonderful.
Just back to my question. I actually born in Ogden, but grew up in southern Idaho. A lot of that time in Pocatello. If you know what Pocatello was, pardon the expression, chief of the Bannock tribe. In the local area there, we had Bannock tribe kids at our schools. Not much about it other than I guess it was kind of cool. Idaho is not considered a very diverse place. We were taught a lot about the Indian tribes, Native American tribes that lived in Idaho or still do. And a lot of the words, names of places are related to those people, their leaders. we were taught a lot of that. In fact, I was taught that the word Idaho was possibly a derivative of Idaho, which was a Native American word. Is any of that happening in Utah? Are the locations of the tribes too far from, lack of a better word, white communities? And do we focus on any real meaningful education in our schools?
I look at Brenda because that's like her. Why do you go ahead? Well, I'll let you talk, but then mostly like Brenda, I don't even know why I'm coming up here. Brenda's the expert on this, and so Brenda just come up. But tell them about the Native American Curriculum Initiative and all the work you've done with the tribes.
Well, two things. One, so excited that people are actually seeing that there are names and places here in the United States that are derived from Indigenous languages. And one of the things that I really want to acknowledge today is the peak that has been known by a derogatory term for so many years has now been changed to a Ute word. And I love that. And so I think there should be education in that. I am the program coordinator for the Native American Curriculum Initiative. It is, we write arts integrated lesson plans with Native American sovereign nations here in Utah. And I do have to say, Chief Sagwitch, people call him Chief Sagwitch. I don't know if he was actually the chief. I think he was actually the band leader. I don't know. And so, yeah. Oh, no. Because I know a lot of people call him Chief Sagwitch, but we go to tribal nations and we ask them, what would you like people to know? And it's amazing the kinds of information that we get. And so we write these arts integrated lesson plans to help teachers feel more comfortable and confident in teaching about Indigenous people here in Utah. And so we have a website. If you're even interested in looking at our website, it is for teachers. It's called the Native American Curriculum Initiative. We've also partnered with the Utah Education Network, UEN, and providing resources there, or selecting resources to be put on their on that website that teachers can go to that offers a little bit more accurate and authentic content for them to use. So we are working toward it, but once again, it's a slow process. We have to allow for authentic growth and authentic time for things to happen. And I don't have any, what else did you want me to say?
That was great.
Oh, yes, that's it.
I could talk forever. Yeah, Brenda has so many resources, so grab her if you have more specific.
And it looks like we have 1 minute left. So I know there are a few more questions and maybe we can stay after and talk for a minute, but I just wanted to give them one more chance to just say a final few words if you would like, and we'll wrap up this session because we've got the 1 minute mark. So
I think the key word here is just action. It needs to take place. That's the main thing, no matter what step it is. And another shout out for museums who can spread that. A very powerful educational institution it is itself by being there, because you don't just go by books. You actually see, you feel, and you have time to think. It's some quiet space. You don't get that nowadays. Matter of fact, museums have become more valuable as time goes on because of all the noise that we hear, that we can actually use our sight. Because a lot of times nowadays, I feel like we're going to become like cows or Mexican in 10, 12 years, be bent down. But in museums, your heads are up. You're looking up, you're looking straight at it. A good posture form, a good healthy way to learn. And I think museums are going to be much more important in the next 10 years.
I feel like I've talked enough, so I know.
I'll just say, whose voice is missing? ask yourselves that question moving forward in projects, and nothing about us without us.
I just want to say, in Navajo, when we end something, it is beauty has been restored. Wijanahasli, 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 wijanahasli.
And we'll end with that. Thank you all.